You work for the railroad, Grandpa?
I work for no man.
Got a name, do you?
I have no name.
Well, that right there may be the reason you've had difficulty finding gainful employment. You see, in the mart of competitive commerce...
You seek a great fortune. You three who are nigh in chain. You will find a fortune. Though it will not be the fortune you seek.
You know that feeling when you hear a line of dialogue and it's so good that you have to take a moment to appreciate it. Whether it's in a movie or in a book, the dialogue just pops. Something about it is so well written, perfect for the character and the moment. Well, I think all writers feel that they'd like their dialogue to be the same way. It should snap, not just sit there. So I decided to talk about that in this week's video. Now, I've talked about some practical methods to make sure your dialogue is unique, how it's more specific to the character you've created. But that's something we could easily forget if we misunderstand the dialogue's purpose. There are so many important factors to keep in mind when writing dialogue, and for me, this is a problem I struggle with. There are too many times where I write a dialogue that just falls flat, where it feels so difficult to understand what the character's point is, what the point of the entire dialogue is. So the very first factor is that there needs to be purpose before personality. Every line of dialogue needs a reason to exist. And it doesn't have to be a great reason, it just needs a reason. So what is this character trying to achieve by saying this? Good dialogue isn't just about sounding cool, it's about advancing the plot, revealing character, or building tension. These are some great purposes for dialogue, and they are so often overlooked. So before writing any dialogue, I have to decide what is the purpose, what is the goal of this dialogue. If it's in a mystery, is it to help lay out the facts? Is it to make connections? Is it to develop the plot in some way? If it lacks a purpose, it's just fluff, unnecessary dialogue that adds nothing to the story or the characters. And this sounds like common sense, but again, it needs to be present in one's mind, and common sense sometimes just isn't. So, telling myself before writing the dialogue that this is the reason why I'm writing the dialogue will help steer the dialogue in the right direction.
Is there anything I should know?
You're asking me how a watch works. For now, let's just keep an eye on the time.
The next important point is its voice. A character's voice needs to be unique to them. They shouldn't sound the same, another problem I struggle with. You should be able to read a random line of dialogue and know exactly who said it without a tag. We often take so much time to think up a background and personality to our character that we fail to convey that personality or that emotional state within its dialogue. So the way to do this is, I believe, give each character a verbal tick or unique phrasing. It could be a simple phrase that pops up often in dialogue when this character is speaking, a phrase that the reader can then associate with that character. So that way, when a dialogue starts out of nowhere, the reader immediately knows who is speaking.
Tell you what it is. I tell you what. Let me tell you something else, man. Let me ask you something. Let me tell you something, man. Let me ask you something, man. What do you do? Let me ask you something. Every time. Let me tell you something else, man.
The next point I want to discuss is sincerity. You want your characters to be sincere about who they are. You need their personality to really stand out. That doesn't mean they need to be some ostentatious character, one who's incredibly extroverted and boisterous. It just means that their personality needs to be clear, it needs to be impactful. If you have a character who is shy or bashful and not very talkative, you can still convey that through their dialogue. It could be in the briefness of their sentences, or perhaps if they are so shy, there could be a stuttering, a lack of confidence, an overcorrection in what they say. This conveys to the reader what kind of personality this character has. Better still, it shows their sincerity. A character should be able to convey who they are and what they want, what they believe in, with absolute clarity. You can't have so many characters who are so angsty and self-conscious, so unsure of themselves, that they're unable to understand what it is that makes themselves tick. From there, the words they use and the cadence to which they use them becomes a lot more impactful and enjoyable. You immediately understand what this character is all about.
I got the energy and the passion to serve as a medic. Right in the middle with the other guys, no less danger, just while everybody else is taking life, I'm gonna be saving it.
The final point I want to bring up when it comes to great dialogue, it's not just about what is being said, it's also about what is not being said. The actual words themselves could highlight what is actually going on. People can convey their emotions and desires without having to explain them in detail. Sometimes it may be necessary, when clarity is incredibly important or when the characters are too frantic to convey the subtext through their actions. But in other cases, subtext is important. These are the conversations where not everything needs to be on the nose. So if your character says "I'm fine" when they're obviously not, the reader feels the emotional charge in their actions, their expression, the way they say it, and what they've just been through. And subtext isn't easy. So that's why I believe the best time to tackle subtext, if not in the moment, is during the editing phase. Look at the dialogue. See if there are any opportunities to replace obvious lines with subtle ones. Show the reader how the character feels through their actions or implications, not just their words.
Going to wait for him to come out?
Yeah.
It'll close for another hour or so. And it's raining pretty hard.
I got my car. Yeah, that's right, it is, isn't it? You know, it just happened. I got a bottle of pretty good rye in my pocket.
Dialogues in writing give us a break from the narration. By giving us this break, we get to become more invested in the characters, as they get to show off their personality a lot more than they can through narration. Whether it's a hero or a villain, the dialogue gives us a little peek into their psyche, helps us understand what they're all about. It's no wonder that getting the dialogue just right is so important for so many writers. And that's why I have two final practical tips that you can keep in mind when writing dialogue. The first is to try speaking your dialogue aloud. If you can even act it out, convey the emotions in the way you speak it, perhaps you can find better ways of phrasing your dialogue, ways that better suit the character or better suit what they are trying to convey. Sometimes it's easier to also spot the problems in your dialogue when you're hearing it aloud rather than just reading it. And the second practical tip is to take a look at dialogue which you know works. This could be dialogue in other books or movies or series. Basically, it's just taking inspiration from other great examples of dialogue and using it in your story. If everything has been written before, I'm pretty sure everything has been said before as well. So don't be afraid to look at dialogue which is similar to what you're writing and use it as inspiration to help give you direction or perhaps a good example of how your dialogue should be formed.
There's a Bible verse I think about sometimes. Many times. It goes, "Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, 'Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?' And I said, 'Here am I. Send me.'"